Welcome to Myth Matters, an exploration at the intersection of mythology, creativity, and consciousness. I'm your host, Dr. Catherine Spela. Wherever you may be in this wide, beautiful, crazy world of ours, I'm glad that you decided to join me here today. In the last episode, I introduced the idea that how we imagine our lives is how we live them. I then took a look at Apple's ad for the new iPad and the criticism it received, which led to reflection on the image of the Greek muses. The images we hold of creativity and the creative process, like the muses, are powerful and important. I think that many people hated the Apple ad because it felt like a callous degradation of the mysterious conversation that takes place between artist, the tools and materials employed, and the muse, the elusive source of inspiration and creative guidance. Well, I'm going to talk about creativity and myth and imagination and life again today, but from a different angle. Today's reflections begin with a fairy tale. Fairy tales are a great source for images to fuel a creative process, any creative process. And if you're thinking to yourself, well, I guess I'll click off now because I'm not an artist, so there's nothing in this episode for me, then please resist that temptation and stick with me. Our creative activities extend far beyond the bounds of what we call art, quote unquote, and they have a value beyond the artistic, which is part of what I want to talk about today. Today's story is a fairy tale collected by the Brothers Grimm. It's called The Three Feathers, and I think it offers an interesting way into these questions of creativity and what's creativity and how is it valuable. And also the hesitation that we often feel when considering our creativity or imagined lack thereof in its many forms of expression. Before, however, I move into today's topic and tell you the story, I want to update you on developments in my life that impact the Myth Matters podcast. Although we may never have had any type of personal contact, I feel that we're partners in this ongoing exploration of mythology and how it informs our lives today. So, a writing project that I've been sitting with for some time is now ripe. I'm excited about this. And I must accept, after several months of debate and experiments, that I can't keep up with my old schedule with Myth Matters and stay engaged with my writing. I do love meeting you here in this space, and there will be new episodes, but they will be less frequent. I expect my writing project to suggest new avenues and offerings as well. I floated the possibility of a webinar to work with a story and images of creativity together in the last episode. Thank you so much to those of you who gave me feedback and expressions of interest in that. I'm not sure where online gatherings like this webinar fit at the moment, so please stay tuned. And on that note, my email newsletter will be an even more important way to stay informed of my new offerings and the ways that I can be of service to you. I encourage you to go to the Mythic Mojo website and join the email list if you're not already subscribed. Thank you so much for your continued interest and support for Myth Matters and Mythic Mojo. Now, on to our exploration of creativity, imagination, and the fairy tale called The Three Feathers. I invite you to relax and let go and enter the space of the story. Notice what attracts your attention. This may be a detail or moment in the story that puzzles you or generates some feelings or ideas. Whatever it is, you can step through that portal to explore the meaning this story holds for you right now. The three feathers. Once upon a time, there was a king who had 3 sons. 2 of the boys were clever and intelligent, but the third one, the youngest one, didn't talk very much. He seemed simple-minded, so the others called him Dummy. The king became old and weak and thought that he was nearing his end, and he didn't know which of his sons should inherit the kingdom, so he decided on a contest. He called his 3 sons together and said to them, "Go forth, and the one of you who brings me the finest carpet shall be king after my death." So there would be no dispute among them. He led them to the front of his castle, blew 3 feathers into the air, and said, "As they fly, so shall you go." 1 feather flew to the east, another flew to the west, and the 3rd feather flew straight ahead a very short distance and fell to the ground. 1 brother went to the east, and the other went to the west, and they laughed at Dummy as they strolled away because he had to stand there where the 3rd feather had fallen, right there by the castle. "Good luck, Dummy." The youngest son sat down. What was he going to do? He didn't really have any place to go. But then he suddenly noticed that there was a trapdoor next to his feather. He lifted it up, found a stairway, and climbed down inside. He came to another door and knocked. And then he heard someone inside call out, "Maiden, green and small, hopping toad's puppy, hop to and fro. Quickly see who is outside." The door opened, and there was a big, fat toad sitting in the middle of a room, surrounded by a large number of little toads. The big toad asked the young man what he wanted. "I would like the most beautiful and finest carpet," Dummy answered. The fat toad called to a young toad, saying, "Maiden, green and small, hopping toad's puppy, hop to and fro, bring me the large box." The young toad brought a wooden box to the big toad. The toad opened it and pulled out a beautiful carpet, the like of which could never have been woven in the world above. The toad gave the carpet to Dummy. He thanked the toad and climbed back up the stairs and into the open air. Now the other 2 sons thought that their brother was too stupid to find anything to bring home. Besides, look at where his feather landed. "Why should we spend a lot of effort looking for a carpet?" they thought. They took some pieces of coarse cloth from the first shepherd's wife they came to and took these rough rugs back home to the king. They returned home just as Dummy arrived, carrying his beautiful carpet. The king was astonished when he saw it. The carpet was so beautiful. He said, "It's only right that the kingdom should go to my youngest son." However, the other 2 sons were outraged. They pestered their father and gave him no peace. "It would be impossible for Dummy to become king," they cried, "because he lacks understanding in all things." They asked their father to declare another contest. "Okay," the father said, "he who brings me the most beautiful ring shall inherit the kingdom." Leading the 3 brothers back outside, he blew the 3 guiding feathers into the air again, and once again the 2 oldest brothers went to the east and to the west, and Dummy's feather flew straight ahead and fell down next to the door in the ground. The youngest son climbed straight away down to the big toad. "What do you want this time?" the toad asked. I need the most beautiful ring." The toad had the box brought out again and pulled out a ring that glistened with precious stones. It was so beautiful that no goldsmith on earth could have made it. "Here," said the toad, and handed it to the youngest son. "Thank you," said Dummy, and made his way back to the castle. The two oldest brothers laughed at the idea of Dummy out looking for a golden ring, and they took no effort at all with the task. Instead, they drove the nails out of an old wagon ring and brought it to the king. When Dummy presented his gorgeous ring, the king said once again, "The kingdom belongs to him." Well, the two oldest sons tormented the king endlessly, voicing all kinds of complaints and warnings. And finally, the old king declared a third contest. This time, he told them, the one who brings home the most beautiful woman will inherit the kingdom. Once again, he blew the 3 feathers into the air, and they flew in the same directions as before. Without hesitating, Dummy went back to the big toad. "I'm supposed to take home the most beautiful woman." "Oh," answered the toad, "the most beautiful woman. She's not here at the moment, but you shall have her nonetheless." And the big toad gave him a hollowed-out yellow turnip, to which was harnessed 6 little mice. The youngest son looked at it sadly and said, "What am I to do with this?" And the toad answered, "Just put one of my little toads inside it." The young man grabbed one of the toads and set it inside the yellow coach. The little toad was scarcely inside when it turned into a beautiful young lady. The turnip turned into a coach, and the 6 mice into horses. The young son thanked the toad, kissed the young woman, and raced away with the horses. He brought her to the king. His brothers came along afterward. They had given no effort to find a beautiful woman, but simply brought along the first peasant woman they'd come upon. And after looking at them, the king said, "After my death, the kingdom belongs to my youngest son." However, the 2 oldest sons again deafened the king's ears with the cry, "We cannot allow the dummy to become king." They demanded that the preference should go to the brother whose woman could jump through a hoop that was hanging in the middle of the hall. The peasant women will be able to do that very well, they thought. They're very strong. And the dainty lady that Dummy brought will jump herself to death. The old king gave in to this request as well. The 2 peasant women did indeed jump through the hoop, but they were so plump that each one fell, breaking her arms and legs. Then the beautiful lady that Dummy had brought home jumped. She jumped through the hoop as lightly as a deer. And after this, all the protests had to stop. Thus, Dummy received the crown, and he ruled wisely for a long time. Now, which moment or detail is calling to you? Make a note so you can muse over it later. Okay, what might this story have to do with creativity? The creative process begins with an exchange, right? A moment of inspiration. A spark appears to light you up. You receive a flash. Maybe you hear words or notes or see something flicker in your mind's eye. A previously unimagined possibility appears, you engage, and something begins to take shape. Whether you call the bringer of this spark or flash or word a muse or a fairy godmother is up to you. You and your intention. What you want to make, whether a painting, a song, or perhaps a king from the young man called Dummy. The toad is an interesting form of the fairy godmother, yes? And a very different image of a muse. Not quite the lithe woman with the long hair and a flowing white gown found in Greek mythology. What significance and value could be found in the image of a toad as a mentor and granter of wishes, or the toad as muse? Toads are more comfortable on Earth than their cousin, the frog. They burrow into the earth and they hop close to the earth. They hunt at night, they're good at hiding, and they eat a wide range of creatures. They tend to be lumpy and bumpy and large-eyed. Some people consider them quite homely and therefore loathsome. Others see the toad's appearance and habits as evidence of an earthy, primal knowing and wisdom. Maybe this is why toads have often been associated with witches and others with magical and in particular herbal powers and knowing. Close to the ground means close to the source. Burrowing into the earth, the source, the womb, the place of gestation, where you plant a seed. And what can the toad swallow? Seems a toad can make use of a great many different materials. How are they held inside? What is derived or birthed from them? If the toad is close to the primal, to the unformed and the undifferentiated, then it's a powerful symbol for possibility. In Chinese Taoism, there is a figure, a man named Liu Haichan, and he is associated with the mythical toad. Perhaps not surprising that this man is associated with an animal. In Taoism, which is a religion, philosophical system, and manner of living rolled up together, the core understanding is that reality is a dynamic interplay of the energies of yin and yang. And a good and wise life is one of balance between the material and the spiritual, the human and the natural worlds. This balance is something that must be found again and again. And in the balance, you have an image of the still point, of the realized self. According to the myths, Liu Hai formed a friendship with the three-legged toad. The toad, known as Chu Chan, is a manifestation of the moon. The three legs refer to the three phases of the moon, and the yin energy. Together, this pair possessed magical abilities and perfected an inner alchemy that generated great wealth, inner and outer gold. Liu Hai became one of the 8 immortals in Taoism, and in the company of the toad, Chu Chan, he is a symbol of prosperity and longevity. The creative process of inner alchemy attributed to Liu Hai Chan points me toward another practitioner of alchemy, one closer to the European tradition of alchemy and also of myth and psychology, C.G. Jung. One more thought in response to the story before I follow this thread and talk about Jung. Did the youngest son, the one who didn't say much and was thought to be simple-minded, the one called Dummy, did he know that he could be king? What do you think? I would say No, he didn't. And yet he saw the trapdoor and was willing to find out where it led. Now, a common block to the flow of our creative energies, to even undertaking, even attempting a meeting with the muse, is doubt about our worth. And this question of self-worth takes many forms. One of them is, do I carry something valuable to offer the world? Do I have something to offer? Another is, do I have what it takes? Am I enough to bring it forth, to live it? And I think this story offers a way to answer those questions. The feather fell right outside the castle gates. There was a toad. There was everything the youngest son required. He became king. As the poet Rilke says, pay attention to what rises up in you. This is where the creative process, as art making or inner alchemy or both, begins. It can be quite profound, the experience of C.G. Jung being one example. Modern psychology began with depth psychology and the work of Freud and Jung in particular. Many of the concepts, theories, and insights that inform the common Western view of psychology, psychotherapy, and the inner life originate here. So, too, the understanding that consciousness, creativity, and mythology are deeply related. Deeply related, actually interrelated, because they well up from the same source, from psyche, and they're expressed in every individual in some fashion. In Collected Works 15, The Spirit in Man, Art, and Literature, Jung writes, we would do well to think of the creative process as a living thing implanted in the human psyche. In other places in the Collected Works, Jung talks about creativity as one of our instincts or something instinct-like. Now, Jung contributed many important ideas and theories to modern psychology and related fields, mythology among them. But what I want to talk about for a minute or two is how he made his initial discoveries and the model or example this offers us. Jung let what rose up in his dreams and fantasies be significant. He engaged with this material. He approached it with curiosity and devotion and artistry. That is, he used the methods of an artist and took these images and figures as his muse. He technically, literally, he did drawing and painting and arranged rocks. His fascination with stone led him to stone carving and even building a stone tower that he lived in at various times. Jung created what many would consider art, quote unquote, the Red Book, for example, and yet he didn't set out to be an artist. He explored the dimensions of his inner life, and in those explorations, he gained a valuable insight about the relationship between craft making, using your hands, and psychic activity. He said, often the hands will solve a mystery that the intellect has struggled with in vain. So what is often relegated to the realm of artists and making art, that is, handling a paintbrush or picking up a pencil, for example, is actually a human activity, a response to the creative impulse to understand and fashion a self and a life, to bring something forth, which isn't necessarily or always or only a product. Jung's Red Book is an extraordinary work. It's a sustained dialogue in text and image. It's much like a medieval illuminated manuscript. and he explores and talks with the figures in his dreams and fantasies. I'll include a few of Jung's paintings from the Red Book with the transcript for this episode. Sono Shamdasani, who edited the Red Book for publication, says the overall theme of the book is how Jung regains his soul and overcomes the contemporary malaise of spiritual alienation. In studying his fantasies, Shamdasani explains that Jung realized that he was studying the myth-creating function of the mind, and according to Jung, his creative process, the conversation with the toad, if you will, was a practice of inner alchemy that saved him and set the course for the rest of his life. In Memories, Dreams, Reflections, the autobiography Jung wrote with Anil Jaffe, he writes, "The years when I was pursuing my inner images were the most important in my life. In them, everything essential was decided. It was the prima materia for a lifetime's work." The feather fell right outside the castle gates. There was a toad. There was everything the youngest son required, and he became king. I have one more piece about Jung and the Red Book to share with you. But first, let's pause and give a warm welcome to new email subscribers, Jessica, Alan, Erica, Renee, Wanda, Zelda, Brandon, Denny, Jennifer, Amelia, and Jack. Welcome to Myth Matters. If you are new to Myth Matters, I invite you to head over to the Mythic Mojo website. You'll find a transcript of this episode, information about story oracle readings and my consulting services and other offerings, and you can also join the email list. As I mentioned earlier, I'll be making new episodes of the podcast less frequently for the foreseeable future. So joining the email list will be the best way to stay in the loop. I send out a monthly newsletter, so it's not like you get bombarded with mail from me. I am so grateful to the Patreon patrons and Bandcamp supporters of Myth Matters. Their financial support and presence in my psyche as companions in these explorations make all of the difference to me. Thank you. Now, at a point, Jung stopped making entries in the Red Book. He took it up one last time decades later in 1959. He was nearing the end of his life, and he entered only a one-page epilogue, written in modern cursive script rather than the Gothic calligraphy that he had used before. The epilogue stops mid-sentence, and one word is tucked alone in the top corner of the last page, the German noun Möglichkeit, which means possibility. My apologies to German speakers out there for my pronunciation. The German word for possibility. And the rest of that page is blank. A beautiful invitation and end. And as Shamus Haney says, who knows where a poem begins or ends? And so it is with the creative project of our lives. If we have a better understanding of our need for myth and all that our old stories offer, we can live more satisfying lives. We can inhabit a better story and create a more beautiful, just, and sustainable world. Feel free to email me in response to this episode or post a comment on the Mythic Mojo website. If you have questions about mythology, I'll do my best to answer them. And that's it for me, Catherine Savela, and Myth Matters. Thank you so much for listening. Take good care of yourself, and until next time, listen to the toad. follow the feather, and keep the mystery in your life alive.